So I want to make this session as valuable as possible. Let me share though, I want you to get as much value out of me as possible. Bleed me dry. But we can go anywhere you want to go. But what I would love to do is just brainstorm with you what you would like to get from me. Okay, so let's talk about unfair dismissal. Now, let me preface this by I am not an employment lawyer. All the advice I'm giving you here is from a HR perspective, and we will give you HR perspective on law, and if there is a requirement for you to seek further legal advice, then I will encourage you to do that. So unfair dismissal is the test, the legal test is, was the termination harsh, unjust or unreasonable? That is the legal test. Now, there are a number of things that go into deciding whether the test was harsh, unjust, or unreasonable. What happens if they decide your termination was harsh, unjust, or unreasonable? Then that employee could take you for unfair dismissal protections, and they could get up to 6 months' salary and or reinstatement. Who wants their employee that they didn't want in the first place back? It can happen, especially if they're over 45, and opportunities for other jobs are not high. So it's really important you get this right. So 6 months salary, if your average person's earning $60,000 a year, or 65 is the average salary in Australia at the moment, they could be walking out the door in the worst case scenario at $30,000. So let's try and avoid that. So how do you avoid that? It's things like offering a support person. My view is you offer a support person every time. That support person is not there to argue the case. That support person is there to be the emotional support for that individual. Say, for example, English isn't their first language, and as you can imagine, and Jessie talked about it, if you've ever been fired before, did it feel good? No. Most people didn't enjoy the experience. And so that person is there to help them think through. And so they might say to them at the end of the session, you remember when they said that? Because they'll have forgotten because their head's spinning in that circumstance. It could be their mother, it could be their brother, it could be their friend. But that individual is there just to sit there and help and provide some support. This will be usually as a result of a process. So it's very rare you fire someone on the spot. There are conditions where you can do that under gross misconduct. And even then, I would strongly recommend you do an investigation. So what is gross misconduct? Gross misconduct is if I go up and punch Mel in the head and everyone saw it and it's really obvious that I did that, I would still suggest you probably need to conduct an investigation and then go from there. But that would be deemed to be gross misconduct. If you've caught them out with their hand in the tea, that would be gross misconduct. In those instances, you can terminate and without notice, so you don't have to pay out the 2 or 3 weeks notice.
In the first month of my business, I had to do on-spot fire.
Yep.
Without knowing any of this. It was a sterilization breach right in front of my eyes for the infection control. Yeah. And I had to do on-the-spot dismissal. Mm-hmm. And of course, the matter went into fair work. It was, so first question to the fair work from my side was, are you there for just her or on my side as well? Mm-hmm. And they said, we work for both. Mm-hmm. And the decision was fair to both of us. Mm-hmm. And of course, the matter says sterilization comes under misconduct.
Yeah. And that would be right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because we're putting someone's health at risk.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just be really clear here, everybody in this as an employer has a duty of care to provide a safe workplace. And that duty of care is for you to provide a safe workplace for you, for your team, and for your patients. So that's a really important thing to do. But still, always, terminations are messy. And unfortunately, at the moment, in front of Fair Work, most of the people who are there are small business owners. And it's because they don't have a team of HR people backing them up. You watch how corporates do this. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed. And if you don't think your team know what their legal rights are now, their friends and families certainly do. And if they've got to put in a complaint, an unfair dismissal complaint, costs $68.20 and a phone call to Fair Work. Why wouldn't you have a crack at it if you could potentially get $5,000 out of it? So what we can't stop them doing is to make a complaint. What we can stop them doing is, when we've worked with our clients, is to make sure we've followed all the processes, and then the Fair Work Ombudsman and say, I'm really sorry, you're good to go. You're off the hook. Yes? So the question was, how do you let them know to bring a support person without sort of letting them know you're going to have one of those difficult conversations? Remember here, the premise is they want to provide support for the individual who's about to go through this. So what you would do in that instance is you would say, hey, George, I always pick on George. Sorry if there are any Georges in the room. Hey, George, we need to have a difficult conversation. I'd like for you to be able to bring a support person along to that. And they might go, well, what's a support person? And then you would have to say, someone that you would like to be involved in that meeting that will provide you with some support, emotional or otherwise, or let you know what, document what's been happening in the meeting. Yes?
Would you allow that to be one of the other employees at the business?
Could potentially be, but what I would premise that at the beginning is to say, you are here as the support person. I realise you're an employee of this business, and I'm assuming you're a friend of the individual who's asked you to come in here. Please note that everything that goes on in this room is confidential. And should you start talking about that outside the room, then that is grounds for potential disciplinary action as well.
I still don't get the practicalities of it. I understand that, but is it Monday morning, you're like, okay, this afternoon we're going to have this difficult conversation, you get someone in at 4 o'clock and that person sweats bricks all day about that conversation. Is that fairer? Can you say, or if you don't want to have that a support person, we can have the conversation now?
A person can give up their right to have a support person, and that's absolutely fine, and I would be documenting that in the counselling meeting. Let's be really clear here. Jessie did a great job of talking about those informal conversations, those coaching conversations. What we're specifically talking about here is when we are on the road, and who still thinks it's 3 strikes and you're out? It's not. So it's what's deemed to be reasonable. But you're absolutely right. Yes, there is a little bit of angst there because you're letting them know, but they've got to get time to let mum know she's got to come in and sit in with them as well. And this is very much designed to protect the individual so they're not being ambushed. Imagine if all these guys were sitting in a room and I'm walking in to be fired by all of these. How am I going to feel? That's going to fail the test of harsh, unjust, or unreasonable. So yes, there is some ickiness around the timing, but it is the protection of the law.
Yeah. But are you applying pressure to override that law if you say we can either have that conversation this afternoon with someone else, or you can have it right now?
You could have that conversation with them, but be very clear, document what you said, and if there's any sign of nervousness there, you can't be seen to be pushing down on them, or pressuring them.
Just to be fair on both sides,
yeah.
I think we're just thinking one person as an underdog here. It's not just difficult for them. For some, at that stage in my time, it was as difficult for me as well. So when we're talking about support person, so I talked to this with the Fair Work people, I said, and I had an employee HR support, so why can't be the neutral person?
It could be a neutral person,
yes,
but it is the individual who's going through the process because it's their support person, not you. But if you wanted a support person in, there's 2 things. One thing, you really need to document these. So you could even ask to record it. Has anyone heard of Rev? Fabulous hack tool, and it records and transcribes. So you might say to them, do you mind if I record this? And then it's just you in the meeting, and that would all be transcribed, and then you get the report. It's $1 a minute. I love it because anytime I have patient notes or client notes for me, that's what I use. Okay. Or you could have somebody come in and sit with you and be the scribe. Now that scribe will take a detailed analysis of what the meeting, you went through in the meeting, and then you need to give it to the individual who's going through the process to say, here's our recollection of the meeting, can you please sign that this is a true and accurate copy? If they say, I don't want to sign that, you say, that's fine, and then you just document, I offered Natasha to sign that document, she refused, but we believe this to be a true and accurate copy. Yes, up the back.
Can they decline that you recorded it all though?
No, you are within your rights as the business owner to record that meeting. You want that on file. Now you may stuff up, to be honest, everyone does, but for the most part you're trying to do the right thing, and they're happy with that. Yes?
Would they be entitled to a copy of it as well?
Yes.
You'd have to provide that and ask for it?
And that's fine, because if you do end up in court, They're going to rely on that as well. So the one thing that I haven't covered off here is the numbers game, which is really important. If you have under 15 employees, your employees can take you for unfair dismissal after they've been with you for 12 months. So please take a note of their timing. If you're feeling someone's dodgy and they've just started, let's do it here rather than leave it till the day before or the day after their 12 months. If you have 15 or over employees, they can take you for unfair dismissal after 6 months. Yes, Jamie?
That was my question.
Was it? Oh, good. Good anticipation. Okay. Yes?
Does that mean that if you're you've got less than 15 employees and you've just got member of staff and she's just a bit daft and a bit vague and just generally a bit rubbish, about...
And let's face it, we've all had them.
So, 5 or 6 weeks in or 5 or 6 months in, you can just say, look, I'm sorry, Bob, this really isn't working. And, no, we don't need to muck around with support staff and all that sort of nonsense and just get rid.
Okay, great question. And I've talked about this to some of the guys that are around the room today. So my view is, at that point, you could fire them appallingly badly and you are off scot-free. But I would encourage you, this is your practice time. This is when you actually practice how to do this really well. So when it actually does count, you know what you're doing. This is just going through a process, and I'm not being flippant there. You need to know what the process is, and you need to handle it with empathy and tenderness. But you have a job to do. Everyone in this room, you cannot afford non-performers. Big business, big end of town. If there's 250 people in the organisation, and even 25 of them average, that is having an impact, but it's nowhere near as much as if you have 7 in your organisation and 3 of them are average. How bad is that? The impact, I'm going to show you some numbers. Make sure we don't get out of here until I've showed you what that's costing you. Yes?
If you have an employee and they're on the edge and they could do better, they could do worse, it comes to 6 months, you look at 6 months and say, look, I think we're going to extend this 6 months to another 6 months because you are average and we're just not quite sure how you're going. We have a performance review and we're looking at that and we're saying, yep, we just need to still see how you're working on things like that. How does that work?
You could do that. And I would encourage you to do that. I talked to someone about probation periods. Probation periods are fabulous things. And my recommendation is 6 months. If you haven't worked it out in 6 months, you're not doing your job probably well enough. So I would have, Jesse does a great job about systemisation and he has a checklist for everything. So what I would have is, say you've got your dental technician here, I would have, after week 1, this is what I'm expecting from you, and you do a check off that. After a month, here's how I expect you're performing. Check, 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 check. After 3 months, this is what I'm expecting, and then you have a probation meetings throughout that. And so it should never come as a surprise to them. That's the other thing, when somebody gets fired. They should see this coming a mile off. Another one of those tests under the unfair dismissal test is, was the person told, Jesse, I'm sorry, your performance is not really where we need to be. In another week's time, we're going to catch up together. And if it's not at this level, your role is at risk of termination. So Jesse, when he comes to me in a week's time, knows, unless he's hit all of those performance criteria, then we'll go for it. One more quick one, because I want to get on to some other good stuff.
Sorry, this is just coming back to question I had before, and so probation periods really are kind of moot in a way because you can still kind of get rid of them. It's really just a kind of probation in name only.
Probation periods give you some flexibility in the sense that in normal contracts, most of your termination clause would be 2 weeks or 4 weeks. In other words, if they resign, they've got to give you 2 weeks. Under probation, it's only a week, so it's a cheaper exit.
Right, okay.
And we did talk about people bringing people on for trials, and there was a real keenness here in the room to put casuals on. You have no more protection with casuals as you do with a permanent. But remember when we were talking about winning the war for talent, and it's a really tough applicant market? Oops, did I go off? You're going to attract a better quality of candidate to a permanent role than to a casual role, in my view. I want to show you this because this is really important. Contracts. Who had their contracts written by an employment lawyer? Great. Strongly suggest you do. Don't ever borrow them from a mate. And they evolve over time. A quick story. I once had a client who ended up not being a client because I don't think he liked what I told him. But anyway, he had a security business, and somebody in their wisdom, they had a whole lot of security guards, and they were all casual employees. And somebody in their wisdom, permanent contract, scribbled it out, retitled it casual. And all the entitlements of being a permanent were carried across to being a casual, and they were up for sale. And I said, I hope your people do their due diligence, because that's not going to bode well. 20 years of service, can you imagine? All that long service leave, all that annual leave was all effectively carried across. So be really careful with your contracts. If you want somebody to write you a great contract, let me know. Okay, this one I want you to get. So remember I talked about engagement as the measure of discretionary effort. These are the guys that are going to be sitting with you at 11 o'clock at night because something's happened and they need help, because they know, love and trust you, and they're bought into the business. So I just wanted to share with you at the moment what Australia's current rates are around engagement. 24% on average of businesses have engaged, 24% of the business employees are engaged. Not engaged is 56%, and disengaged is 20%. So what does this look like in reality? Think of it as a boat. And at the moment, say we've got 10 employees. I can't work out the maths roughly, but say 3 of them are engaged. That means they're rowing the boat forward. Row, row, row. And then say we've got 5 of them. They're not doing anything. They're just standing there. They're not being particularly difficult, but they're not bought in. And what are we up to? 2 are actually rowing the boat this way. What does that cost you? It costs you a lot of money. Let me give you some scary examples and you can work it out. Work out what your head count is and times it by, in this instance using the same statistics we had before, by 76%. That means that actually if you could halve a person, 5.32 of your employees are actively either not engaged or disengaged. Now, what does that cost you? They have worked out the cost of having disengaged or not engaged employees is 34%. So what I did here is 65% is the average salary, times that by 30%. That one employee not being engaged is costing you $22,000 a year. I kid you not. And if you've got 5 of them, times that by 5. So it's really important you build highly engaged teams. How do you do that? You hire really well. And a technical, behavioural, cultural interview. And the next thing that you do is you manage them. So tell them what success looks like and manage them to that success. And do regular performance appraisals. But they don't have to be complex. Big end of town have killed performance appraisals. I think it's 4 questions. What did you do well in the last 6 months? What do you need to improve? What training do you want? And where do you want to go? If you just ask those 4 questions twice a year and then told them whether they were meets, does not meet, or exceeds, then they've got a benchmark of where they're at. What did you do well? What do you need to improve? What training do you need? And that's the other thing with performance management. You need to offer training. You need to have been seen to try and improve their performance. And then where do you want to go? This is a really powerful model, and you can use this with your patients and you can use it with your employees. Meets. Nice to have. Because a big part of this, guys, is we don't communicate particularly well, and we don't communicate with our team. The amount of times I've been in performance management discussion and they said, but no one ever told me I was doing a really average job. If I'd known, or I knew what success was looking like, I would have done something about it. And this one is blow your mind. I do this with my clients now. So, talk to your employees. If you do this, this would meet my expectations of you as an employee. If you do these things that are sitting here, that's nice to have. I'm a bit happier now. I've got a bigger smile on my face. If you did this, that would blow my mind. Who can give me an example of what your receptionist could do that would blow your mind?
Good review.
Good
for a
review.
business. Yeah.
So getting patient feedback.
Patient feedback.
Yep.
Yeah, that will be blowing.
That would blow mind. And isn't it interesting? Because in some ways, that should be a meets, but it could very well be a blow your mind result. And this morning, what blew my mind was they were pulling up all the carpet in the hallway, and I'm struggling with my trolley and my suitcase on it. And the fellow who was pulling up all the carpet came and said, "Would you like some help?" And he just rolled my bag, and it had mind of its own. And I went downstairs and I said, "The guys who are rolling the carpet out, he just rolled my trolley down the thing, and that was really helpful to me. Thank you." And guess what? Most people would have never bothered to say anything. But that blew my mind. I wasn't expecting it. I expected to keep doing this. Yes, where did we go?
For me, to be honest, when you were talking about front staff, is just actually answering the phone exactly to the script that we have, because that would just take so much stress. You would have so much confidence knowing that would really blow my mind, that they would make that one key tiny thing so important that it would feel like, then we'd start looking at incentives. You know what I mean? Because for us, we could relax and then we could move on to other things other than that. So that would be blowing my mind.
Which is a great example. Sorry, your name is? Angela. So one of the advantages there is we need to be very clear about what's the impact of the blow your mind result. And if they know what the impact is, they're more inclined to do it. And if you reward them, they're more inclined to do it again and again and again. So you may even have an incentive, and it might be, "I'm going to send you out for dinner. If I hear you've done this script every time perfectly in the next week, I'm sending you out to wherever the local restaurant is." Just little things like that can have a big difference. And then often what happens when they reinforce that behaviour is they actually get good results back. And so that reinforces the behaviour as well, because they got good feedback from the client. So it again reinforces the behaviour to happen again and again. Yes?
What blows our mind is when we get a text or an email at 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night from our front office coordinator to say, "Hey, I've just been thinking, if we do this, it's going to solve some issue."
So is she an engaged, not engaged, or disengaged?
100% engaged.
And how many of those have you got in your team at the moment, and how many do you want?
We've got a couple, actually. We've got a pretty good group, but I would love more. Yeah. No, we've got a pretty good group.
Okay. So you know how Jesse was doing his ABC guys?
Yeah.
So I might have taken it out. I took it out. So you know how we were talking about ABC? You want in that, what's top quarter for you? A. So your A players, you want 80 to 90% of your employees in that A space. Anyone who's in this quarter, this half of the diagram, they are on performance management, either to return to required levels of performance or out the door. Okay, and what happens with those trainees that are in the little bit here, if you don't look after them, they get dragged into that quadrant. And what you want to do is actually have what I call your volunteers, your A players, mentoring and guiding up. You don't have to do all of it, but get your A players mentoring up your trainees. Yes, up the back.
So when you do appraisals and you've got some people who are blowing your mind, how does that link to things like pay rises and that? So you've gone in, you've told them they're awesome.
Yeah. My personal view is on pay rises is, one, guess what, guys, just in case you don't know, if anyone's paying right on the award at the moment, 1st of July, there's the minimum pay increase. So you're going to have to make sure you've gone up if you're paying right on the award, because they've all gone up 3.5%. I'm a great believer in you have discretionary bonuses, because that gives you the opportunity to bend and flex. So if you have an A player, you want to make it worth their while. I was chatting to someone last night, stay interviews. What will keep you with me for 5 years? What will keep you with me for 12 months? What do you love about working here? What's the one thing you would change if I gave you a magic wand? You as a business owner have a discretionary spend, and say, for example, you make profit, you might want to share that across the whole team. But if you've got 1 or 2 A players, you might want to say, "You have done a fantastic job. Here's a $2,000 bonus." And watch how well that works. But again, money may not be doing it for them. It might be something else. So find out what motivates them, and it's different for everybody. But you can come up with some really clever ways of doing that. We talked about the guys in rural area. You might want to offer them a relocation bonus to get them to come, and you handcuff them for 2 years. I'm going to pay you a relocation bonus, and if you are still with me in 2 years' time, that's great. We'll look at extending fixed term contract. If you have left me, you've got to pay that back, and it's all in the contract. So get creative.
Wow.
Wow, wow, wow.
That was speed dating.
Yeah. Anyone feel like they've just got an HR fire hose of just information? It's just wonderful. Thank you so
My
much, Tash. That's
pleasure.
wonderful. Thank you, Don.
Good.
Cheers. Thank you.
No problem.